Hey, everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Making Sense of It All. I am very pleased to bring you my guest today, Brandon White. Brandon, thank you so much for joining me.
Jesse, thanks for having me, man. I feel like we almost did a mini episode before we hit record.
I think you're right. So the word or the title that would come to me when I think about you or when I think about, everything we just talked about is kind of a renaissance man. You do a lot of things and you've gotten pretty decent at a lot of different disciplines, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I've been really lucky, to be honest. And I think it's all driven by my just curiosity that I dive into. I don't do much of anything in moderation. So when I go into these things, I just dive in 100%, fully focused. And then when I get to that 90% or 95% of it, I don't want to say I get bored, but if another opportunity, which we can talk about here in a minute, how my career sort of been a winding path, if it's something else jumps in, then I go all in. And I've really been lucky in the sense that it's, knock on wood, worked out.
I'll go down my first rabbit hole because I think you said something there that I hear a lot of people say when people, people will tell people do everything in moderation, or they'll tell people when they invest, they'll say make sure you do, that you're safe with your money or that you allocate it in different parts of the economy. But I hear a lot of successful people, not just yourself, but a number of people that I would consider successful say that they're all in. When they believe in something, they dive into it. And I just want my audience to hear that. And I want them to hear your take on how you feel about that.
I think moderation's for people who are scared. I mean, here's what I'll say without going
Polite
on,
way to say it.
without having some rant. Usain Bolt did not moderately train to be the fastest man in the world.
Fair.
Steph Curry doesn't moderately train to be the best shooter who has ever lived, period. No great person that I know, or not know, but or know of,
Sure.
has ever moderately done something and been great at it. I mean, sure. Look, fun fact. I was a grand prize winner in the Harley Davidson free ride sweepstakes. I won in 52 million. I won a Dynaglide Super Sport. Great motorcycle. You can occasionally get lucky. But the reason that even happened was because I didn't moderately build my Fat Boy. I went all in and I was charging on my credit card and the parts were giving me points. So there's just no, I mean, for your listeners out there, if you think of anyone, like, you don't need to be preached to. Just think of anyone that you know, whether they're public or in your life, that is really great at what they do. You just can't do it in moderation. And for people, a lot of these amateur armchair psychologists and coaches out there that you read on the internet, they just don't know what they're talking about. And they act like they do. But then if you ever ask to see their tax returns or you really peel back the onion of what's going on, you see it's just a farce. So I don't believe it. It doesn't mean that you can't still have a good life and have some balance, but you're going to be out of balance. You're going to be out of balance if you're going to do something great. And that's not bad. That society has said that's bad because, I don't know, some like middle achievers have decided that that's like a way to justify the middle, but it just doesn't work. And I don't mean to come across as too harsh or anything like that. But the reality is, if you follow that advice, I'm just not sure how you're going to make it.
Well, I think you said something there, and I think it's very true. The people who preach work-life balance are people who are probably middle of the road at a lot of things. But what you're doing really is you're redefining success. You're telling people that success now is, being, what do you think, 50 to 70% at everything. If I get C's on everything, I'm a happier person. I've got more balance in my life than the guy who's getting A pluses and studying his tail off. That's what they're essentially trying to redefine as success.
Yeah. And you have to go all in simply because you can't outrace time, meaning experience. And like, it's very, there's really no shortcut in that way. So you're going to go all in at some point, I mean, I just don't know how you ever get to that extra level without it. And if somebody out there is listening and has it, please write to Jesse, and just please forward the email and the framework for it to me.
Fair enough. I'll take those. So, before we dive into everything, I feel like there's one thing I always kind of like to pull back and have my audience understand who they're listening to. And so I know that you have bought and sold three different companies, and like at different, different levels of success with each, or however you would define success. But you had to start somewhere. Like, what was it like? Where in your whole life's journey, and when it came to business, did you decide that you wanted to be an entrepreneur, that this is what you wanted to do, that you weren't just going to be somebody's employee, you weren't going to be that 9 to 5 guy looking for work-life balance? Like, tell everybody where did it start?
Yeah. And I just want to preface this by saying we're going to highlight the successes, but I want everyone to know that I failed as much as I failed more, quite frankly. Call them projects that never made it to a company, or call them semi companies that never made it. There's a lot of things. I just want to say that up front, but I didn't
You can
really.
highlight those too. I mean, like, honestly, it's a great point. People learn more from their failures than they do successes. So please call out any of them that you want to, because I think people learn a lot from it.
Yeah. So I started my career. I'm going to roll back because you sort of set that up. I went to college. I was raised by a single mom. I thought that I was going to go to law school. I graduated college, and I really just told people I was going to law school because I really didn't know what I was going to do. And if you tell people you're going to be a lawyer or a doctor or something like that, like, people don't keep questioning you, Jesse.
No, it sounds good.
Right. Well, and it's people know what it is. It's a known thing. Like, oh, you're
That's
going to
right.
do this, this, and this, and you're going to have a career and whatnot. But I graduated. I went actually back to the tree nursery where I had worked and helped pay my way through school. And after about a year there, my mom said, like, she said, this is not your future. You went to college. There's a better path for you. You have more potential, is basically what you were
Sure.
saying. And she said, why don't you just go back to school? So I applied to go get my master's in psychology. I had an undergraduate in psychology. Went back to get my master's in psychology, and I went to a school, in a small private school on Eastern Shore, Maryland, and where I fished I'm a big fisherman. I fished through school, all through school. I actually lived on a house on the water and had a boat and really had a good time. And when I was working on my master's, I was looking for a magazine that was fly fishing and light tackle focused, and there was no magazine. Now, this is 1990s for people listening. So
Okay.
the internet was around, but it was a very small community on the internet at that time. And I had previously taught myself how to code. I was coding BASIC on a Commodore VIC-20 and a Commodore 64, which ages me a little bit, but I was self-taught, and I didn't code all the time, but I was very intrigued at a young age, and I always was on the computer. So I decided at that time that I was going to publish a magazine that was targeted. I was living on the school is in Maryland, so it's in the Chesapeake Bay, which is the largest estuary in the world, has great fishing in the Chesapeake Bay and on the coast, and a million tributaries that have just, I mean, it's an epic place to be for if you're a fisherman. And I went to the local printer and I said, hey, I want to publish a magazine. And he very kindly walked me through a very good set of questions that led me to the fact that I did not have enough money to be able to execute that. I think at the time I had like $800 in my savings account, which was written on paper at that time in these little savings account books they used to give you.
Yep.
So I said, well, I thought to myself, I was always on the internet on bulletin boards and whatnot. And I said, hey, why can't I put a magazine online? Which, to everybody listening and yourself, Jesse, probably rolls your eyes and be like, yeah, of course you could do that. Well, that wasn't, of course you could do that in 1996. That's interesting. I'm not sure you can do that. And I have no idea how you're ever going to make money, but I did it. I recruited a kid from the computing lab where I used to hang out and do coding and surf the internet and whatnot. And I got a job on a spinach farm, of all things, doing basically finance and things to help them run the farm. I used that money to pay him. And then we built this thing. And in 3 months, we were written up in this magazine. And it was called Chesapeake Angler at the time. And it took off. And it was a magazine online with writers. And we were getting traction. But then I said to myself, why why do I need to pay, which I didn't have a lot of money anyway, to pay writers? And I mean, back then you could get $800 for a photo. I mean, you start adding up and you got a $3,000 give or take 400 to 800 word article, and not for the internet. You're pumping those out, as anybody listening knows, and yourself, Jesse, you pump out a blog post like that every day. I said, well, why can't we just have the users leave the content? So we built a message board. We built all this tech from the ground up because there wasn't WordPress, there wasn't message board, there weren't all these things. You were
Right.
In the beginning, we were flat file HTML. We were literally writing HTML and text files and uploading it to the internet. So we did that, and we kept getting traction. And one day I used to read every morning in the library, and from the Time magazine, they had up and coming, or like this little tech section in the beginning. And it had an article about David Philo and Jerry Yang, who were the founders of Yahoo. And they had just raised something around $1.7 million from Sequoia Capital. And they're going to do this phone book thing, which I knew about because it was called Yahoo. It was called something else before that. But I looked at it and I was like, if they can raise money for that thing, I can raise money for this fishing idea. Fishing's a huge market. It's actually a $50 billion market in the United States. It's very fragmented. I learned a lot of lessons along the way, but it's a very big market and a lot of people fish. And in saltwater fishing, there's a lot of money. The average angler spends something probably around $1,700 a year. So
That's not, and that cannot be including gas.
No, I mean, not anymore. So I had no idea how to write a business plan. My then girlfriend, now wife, and I got in her car, drove to Annapolis, Maryland, picked out the best book on how to write best book, meaning I had no idea. It just said how to write a business plan. I bought the book, read the book, wrote a business plan, just started reaching out to people. I had no idea how to raise money at all, zero. And in those days, it wasn't like these online communities where it's like, here's how you raise money. You do 11 pitch deck and blah, blah, blah. Like, none of that. So I wrote a 50-page business plan effectively. I sent it out. I networked with some people. One of them, the alumni from college, was in the alumni magazine. I'd reached out to him. He was interested. And one day he emailed me and he said, hey, I had lunch with a guy today. I didn't give him your name because I didn't want to give up anything about your business and blah, blah, blah. But I think you should meet him. I was like, okay, well, thanks a lot. Sure, make the introduction. A few hours later, I get an email that says, hey, this is Tom. I'm from Sequoia Capital. You might have known us. We did Yahoo, Cisco, Apple, and a few other companies.
Very cool.
Now, Sequoia Capital, for those who don't know, is probably arguably the most successful, but one, at least in the top 3 in the entire world, most successful venture capital firms in the entire world. And to get an email like that from a partner, the top of the line partner, not partners like these days, associates are called partners because entrepreneurs don't want to meet non-partners because they want to make sure that they're meeting people that are worth their time so they can get a deal done.
Titles are meaningless at this point in life.
Yeah, like the industry changed the titles because it was true, because I will get to it, but I was a venture capitalist and I was an associate, and CEOs don't want to talk to associates. They want to talk to partners who they know they can get a deal done. So anyway, I was a little bit in disbelief, Jesse, and I wrote back. I said, attached to my business plan, here's my address. Love to see you. He wrote back, I'll be there tomorrow.
Nice.
Now, I'm living in Easton, Maryland, which is a very small town on the eastern shore of Maryland. I'm living with my then girlfriend, now wife, in a 1,400 square foot house that we paid $107,000 for, which I think a Tesla X costs more now. Living on peanut butter and jelly and tuna fish sandwiches, basically. Starting this company on the internet, of which people think is crazy in the first place. So the next morning, I heard a knock on the door. I came down from my office, which was a spare bedroom, and I was like, oh my God, thanks for coming. We started to do some talking, and he looked at me and he said, hey, let's go check out your office. I turned around and walked up these old really hardwood pines floor in our house, which we still own, and walked upstairs. And I looked back to see if he was following me. It was like this weird look on his face, but I was like, all this is upstairs. Let's go. So we walk up there. He gets into this, you can imagine, this small bedroom, just stares and looks around. He's looking around, Jesse. And he looks at me and he's looking around, doesn't say a word. So you can imagine my temperature is going up because I'm worried now.
Sure.
I'm probably getting red in the face. I could have sweat. I don't know. But finally, I break the silence. I said, hey, look, I know you drove at the time he was living in DC, and DC is about 90 minutes away. I said, listen, thanks a lot for coming, man. I'm so grateful. Not in a million years could you make this up. But if you came looking for more, the only thing I can offer you is my partner who became an early guy in the company, the guy I had hired from the computing lab. He has a spare bedroom down the road, and that's our other office. We can go see him too. I said, but otherwise, like, if you were looking for more, this is it. Now,
Right.
and of course I was like that. I mean, this guy's from Silicon Valley, which is, he's the top of the top. So he looks at me, it was straight in the eye, Jesse. He's like, calm down, kid. He's like, this is how we found Cisco. He's like, I actually thought you were bigger because I called your line and you have this answering machine. And I did. I rigged that thing up, Jesse. Like, I had, you go through a phone tree and
Right. Create
we had the whole
create a
thing.
bigger shadow. It's like the little dog with the big dog or whatever. You create a bigger shadow if you just put the light in the right direction.
Exactly. So he said, I said, we talked and went through some stuff. And I said, you want to go to lunch? And he said, yeah. So we went to lunch, he flipped over the placemat and we did the business plan on the back of the placemat, literally. And I'll never forget. It was team, product, market, financing. That's all he really wanted to know. And we wrote it on the back of placemat. After we had a good lunch and I said, hey, you want to go fishing? He's like, right now. And I was like, yeah, let's go fishing. The boat's at my house. We'll hook it up. We'll go fishing. He puts the business plan in his pocket. We go back to the house. I load up the stuff, hook up the boat, 21-foot Parker, and we roll down the highway to the boat ramp. We go across Chesapeake Bay and we just slay striped bass. And on the way, had a really good time. Really didn't talk business that much at all on the boat, quite candidly. He loved fishing and
Yeah.
he had been actually using the site, come to find out. On the way home, he says to me, I'm driving a car. I'm driving 60 miles an hour down a major highway, pulling a 21-foot boat. But he says to me, he said, well, how much money do you guys have? And I said, well, I don't know how much we have in our bank account right now. And he said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, we trade stocks to fund the company. And he said, what? I was like, yeah, we trade stocks. And he said, with company money. I was like, I own the company. Yeah. With company money. I said, we could have 7 and we could have 25 today. I don't know what's going on there with my partner today. And he just like shook his head, Jesse. And then out of the corner of my eye, I see him writing something. Turns out he's writing a check. And he hands me over a check for $50,000. And he says, no paperwork, no anything.
Yeah.
And he said, let's go, kid. He said, but one thing, you can't trade. You can't trade.
I say, don't put it in the market.
He's like, you can't trade that. And, I don't know how many weeks it was. 8 weeks later, we raised $1 million and we were off to the races.
It's amazing.
I'll cut short on how it worked out. So the market, so we had a chance to sell the company for about $25 million, which is, even in today's world, life-changing money. Turned it down. I'm not going to go in as a very big media company of which everybody who's listening knows. And they were going to take our online presence and make it basically their fishing component, distribute it to all their major newspapers. At the time, newspapers were big, put it in the columns, and then run their fishing shows on Saturday mornings based off of that. And then it was like this whole, because they needed an interactive, at the time, it was all these companies were scrambling. How are we going to get on the internet? Board turned it down. I did not turn it down, but board turned it down. Market crashed in 2001. I wound up, we had raised a bunch of money after that, a few $1 million. All the investors freaked out. Internet's going away. I was like, the internet's not going away. I bought the company back from the investors, and in 3 months it was cash flow positive. And I ran it as a side hustle for many years because I was, just to skip, I was a venture capitalist. I worked for 2 venture capital firms investing in technology. I worked at America Online for about 1.5 years before I was recruited back out. I went to business school, got my MBA. And then after my MBA, I decided that I had a 5-year plan that I was going, the fishing site was throwing off some like multiple 6 figures a year. It was a very good side hustle. And
Sounds like it.
I I had a 5-year plan to sell it for a lot of different reasons. But one is I was still living in that house. I wanted to get to Silicon Valley. I wanted an exit, like every entrepreneur wants that exit. And at year four, a big at the time the media company was about $9 billion market cap, came knocking and said, "Hey, do you want to buy it?" And that's how I got here to Half Moon Bay, where I live now, and this recording studio and whatnot. A lot of stuff happened in between there, but that's what the outcome was with the fishing site. Like I said, I worked for 2 venture capital firms. I worked for AOL. I started another company that is actually in the Department of Defense and the intelligence community space. And we built a product that was originally going to be a CRM, customer relationship management tool, that you didn't have to put data into. And it turned out to be an intelligence product. That company, turns out the government doesn't really know how to buy software. We then tried, as an offshoot of that, to build a government services company that ultimately we sold, and then ultimately actually just got resold to a big public government contractor. And then the last major thing I did was I was in finance and managed bonds, a few $100 million worth of bonds. I was a junior partner, quote unquote, but one of the 2 partners in a major firm, of which basically we got a buyout. So I've gone, and we were doing, like, not just regular government work, we were doing classified work in the US government. So, and one of those companies got funded by the government's investment vehicle. It's been an incredibly wild ride. In between there, like I said, I started projects and failed, and, got a lot of scars on my back, but it's just been an
Sounds like it.
incredible career.
It's crazy. And take it back for a second. Everything that you just said here, like everything you just talked about, this amazing ride that you've had, it all stemmed from taking a gentleman fishing. You created an experience for somebody that ended up changing your life and put
No,
your
it's
life on a potentially different trajectory than it would have if you didn't. If you would have stopped at lunch, if you would have stopped at the business plan on the napkin or on the back of the placemat, and if you wouldn't have created an experience to where that guy had a great time, as you said, slaying striped bass or whatever you guys caught, like, does it even happen? Does he walk away from that and doesn't have that passionate, exciting experience with you and create that bonding moment to where he pulls out a checkbook and he writes you a check? Does it even happen if you don't go fishing?
there's been so many pivotal moments in my life that are just, and in everybody's life, if you really reflect on yourself, I be very different. Could have still turned out, could have still been here.
Sure.
I don't know, but what I will say is I've never been a person. I'm super curious. My wife doesn't let me ask questions after 11 o'clock. I think that's why I got into podcasting.
Fair.
The and I think that, I never, even when I hire people, interview people. I think interview is terrible. I want to get to know people. I mean, I joke that my master's in psychology and I had concentration in counseling is worth more than my MBA, which, I'm half joking a little bit, but at the end of the day, it's about people. And I never really thought about it the way, honestly, it's been 20 plus years, in the way that you just said. I've always really just said, I've got a guardian angel that, I and a lot of people help me, Jesse, in my life. I mean, clearly investing, he wants to make money and whatnot, but there was a lot more help than just that money. And a lot of people helped me along the way that did not need to help me. And I have been, I try to pay that back. I mean, I'll tell you another quick story of, like, a mentor that will blow your mind. One of my customers, I call them customers, viewers, had emailed me. He's like, "Hey, you want to go fishing on Friday?" So I'm like, "Yeah, of course I want to go fishing on Friday." I go fishing with this guy. He's a big real estate mogul, apparently, but I don't pay attention. We're just like slaying fish. We would go to these fishing spots and have fun. Well, turns out, no, it didn't take me that long to learn it, Jesse, that this guy had sold he built a real estate company, sold it to Merrill Lynch when he was 31 years old, made a lot of multi-millions of dollars, got a 5-year non-compete, came back right on the day after his fifth year, started another real estate company that started residential and commercial, sells, takes that, combines it, takes it public.
Okay.
Warren Buffett buys it, which is now Berkshire Hathaway Real Estate. And this guy's on the board with Warren Buffett. And I'm riding around with him on Fridays. And ultimately, we traveled around the world for years. To this day, he's been a mentor to me. And once I learned that, of course, I started asking business questions. But we would spend hours in the truck driving to these places on Fridays, to fish for an hour or two, great places. And we, those conversations, and he didn't have to teach me everything he did, but that's just an example of shared passion, of course.
100%.
And he needed somebody who could fish on Fridays because he would work part of the day and take off really on Fridays. So he needed someone else who could do that. But there's just, those types of things. What happens if I don't meet him? I could tell you like 5 things that don't happen. And
sure,
real estate investments. And I invested in a water permit here in Half Moon Bay, and I paid 7, and it's worth 125. I wouldn't even known about those types of, quote, air quotes for those who are listening, real estate investment, right? Like that's a real estate investment, whether you realize it or not. But you don't learn about all those types of things that are even available unless you have somebody who's really teaching you that. And they're not going to teach it to you in a textbook.
No doubt. I mean, I feel like anybody listening right now just typed in water permit into Safari or into their Google search.
Yeah, some cities have limited water permits,
especially out in California.
Yeah, that's probably another podcast, Jesse.
So, there's probably a lot of people that are going to be like, "Hey, why didn't you dive into some of the stories that or some of the things you touched on?" But I mean, for time's sake, but also
just I'm sorry if we ran long on that.
No, we're good. We're totally good. But I'm just saying there's certain, I don't want to go into everything that you have done for a living or everything that, all of your different things. But what I find really fascinating is, like you said, you've had a lot of mentors. You've had people that have, been pivotal in your career, things that have happened that if you didn't create an experience with that person, or if that person didn't see value in you and the relationship that you represented for them, then things don't happen for you the way that they do. You've also taken the chance to give back to people. You're a #1 bestseller on Amazon. You've taken.
I was. I mean, I teach the class for free to kids in high school because I think they need to learn how to write business plans.
So share with my audience about that. What was your #1 bestseller on Amazon, and what does it represent for people who are listening?
Oh, it's a book on how to write a business plan, 11 slides. Business plans changed and they don't need to be complicated. And I made a lot of mistakes and I pitched a lot of investors. I've been an investor. I'm still an angel investor. And I wrote this book mainly because I got tired of repeating myself, Jesse.
And I'm making you do it again.
It's a very simple, easy read. It's called Back of the Napkin to Business Plan, 11 slides. So easy you can do it on a flight from San Francisco to New York. And that's how easy I made it. I formulated. I mean, like your problem slide is a problem does something. Their pain is existing solutions are broken because. That's really how easy it is to figure out. I mean, there's more to it, obviously, but those are the types of formulas that I've come up with over the years. Just because, like I said, I've tried so many businesses and I've been pitched and have been pitched and have pitched. And I wrote the book, and I told you, nobody gets rich off of selling books unless I don't know. Maybe this thing sells 1 million copies, which I hope. But at the end of the day, I really hope it just helps someone. Like
100%.
Put a framework around their idea to give them a better chance. One of the things that I do say, and I think is important, is that in my career, I've taken a lot of risks. But people look at risk and they don't understand that risk isn't just, hey, Jesse, I've got an idea. I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to go after it. Like, that's not using risk correctly. To use risk correctly, you really need to control every single thing that you can control, because there are so many things that you can't control that it's that slightest edge that's good. It's like playing blackjack. It only gives you 0.5% edge if you count cards, but that's the difference between winning and losing.
I think that's very well said.
That's what you've got to do. So I teach the course to high school kids here in town. I have a podcast that you can listen to. It's just called, I guess you could just go to your podcast player and search Business Plan Brandon and it'll come up. You can buy the book. It's like $19. I make like little no money off of books. But it was really just to say, hey, if you have an idea, here's how you can get it quickly done, and live your dream.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, and I think that, you said it, it's not like it's not about making money all the time, but it frames you differently as well. For people who don't know you, it frames your expertise. It teaches them who you are from a position of, of being an expert in your field. It doesn't necessarily it it takes away some of the limits for the people that you might potentially get to know. You never know. Somebody might pick up the phone and call you one day, shoot you a message on LinkedIn saying, "I read your book. I got a great idea." And maybe it becomes the next thing that you may make a few bucks off of being an angel investor or, a venture capitalist. Who knows? But it's another way, it's another medium that gets your name out there and your expertise out there.
Yeah, and writing a book is actually hard. It's harder than you think, even a simple book. But I 100% agree. And the truth is, Jesse, if someone reads the book and builds a business, and I have no part of it other than that helped change their life, then that's a win for me because I've been in that seat and I
Yes.
know how it feels to have someone help in some way that really changed the trajectory. Just like we went back to that story and you said it, that 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 lunch I had changed, that meeting changed
No
the
doubt.
trajectory of my life. Like, I mean, as a kid on the East Coast, Silicon Valley was a dream. He brought me here. I mean, it was, now I'm here, but those types of things are just they change your life. And I know how grateful I've always felt to to have someone do that. So if I can do that for someone else, like it's like catching fish, Jesse. What happens is first you want to catch fish, then you want to catch a lot of fish, then you just want to catch a lot of big fish. Well, then you want to catch a big fish, then you want to catch a lot of big fish. Then you get to the point where I'm like, I want to take you fishing, Jesse, and I want you to catch fish, and I just want to take your picture and see how happy you are. Like, you do get to that point, and that's enough payback. So if it helps
I,
someone that's listening to your show, then I'm grateful for that.
I think that's absolutely fantastic. So along those lines, talk to me about what you're doing with a company called Third Brain.
Yeah, so Third Brain, a friend of mine's had, and he asked me to come aboard in the last year and a half. We help companies automate their operations with AI. So bringing AI into a company, there's so much buzz out there as everybody
Huge.
looks at. Yeah,
I feel like overnight it was one of those things that just all of a sudden it was a conversation in every single industry and in every single business topic had AI or automation somewhere in it.
yeah, and the problem is that you can't just like willy nilly do that. If you own a business, you need to have a strategy, and that's what we bring to the table is an a structure of which to work in to be able to do that, so that because basically what you have right now is everybody grabbing every tool that they see and cool and automates and optimizes, and I don't know what other buzzword we can use, Jesse, but it does all that. And then I've been there. I mean, we were there in the early internet days. You've got 50 programs, no unified data lake, and you're gonna have to rebuild from scratch, and it's gonna be really painful. So Third Brain's a cool company. You can just, it's number 3 RD Brain, and you could check that out if you have any business people out there are looking for help with their operations. And we really act that the company embeds digital operations team in your company so that you don't have to hire it. And I mean, there's so many things you have to know in these days, even to get into AI, much less hire people. Make sure that you're hiring the right people.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it kind of from the side of just hearing the conversation switch from, kind of a standard and traditional way that people are manufacturing things, people are trying to get their products out and trying to, deliver their services to their customers. And in the last, probably I'd say 12 to 18 months, I've really heard my customers and people talking about, okay, you know, I need to do this differently. I have to change the way that I think. I have to change. I have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable when it comes to learning things that I don't know, because I think there's a lot of people who are in blue collar industries, who are in industries that didn't necessarily have to they didn't have to utilize a computer for the most part, but now if they're not utilizing the tools that are available to them now from an AI and automation standpoint, I'll give you an example. Phone calls. I've got people that'll still make manual phone calls to drive sales leads. And they might be making, they might make 25 dials in a day or 100 dials in a day and feel good about themselves. Whereas they might have an auto dialer and essentially a robocaller making 10,000 dials a day with their sales competition. It's apples and oranges. I mean, you're bringing a butter knife to a gunfight. It's not even close anymore. And if you're not utilizing these tools, you're very quickly making yourself a dinosaur. You're going to be extinct from the game. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think you have to, I mean, using them properly, but you're absolutely right. I mean, you it is a force multiplier that is, it's not the end all of end all. So I don't want to say that.
Sure.
Although in a minute here, we're going to have robots like Rosie and the Jetsons, and that's going to be real in my estimation in less than 2 years. Mainly because I do have a Tesla and I have full self driving and the car drives itself. And it really does drive itself. It works.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if you're not up on it, and we've had really traditional customers come to us. So we have a company who does pole buildings and they're adopting AI and they've totally changed their whole operations and inventory and timeline to build because they've got their operations automated. I mean, there's so many, and these are not some of these things for your listeners. Some of these things can be small lifts,
Yeah.
small implementations is what I'm saying. But, your example with the auto dialer, it's even worse than that, actually. I talked to a person the other day who actually wanted some help with consulting from Third Brain, but he has, the caller isn't just calling, and it's calling his customers and giving them updates on statistics, but there's no human.
Right.
It's all AI. So
And it's
like,
getting better and better and better.
no, and he eliminated, well, what happened, what he told me is a person quit and he figured out how to automate it. So he automated it and now it's replaced that person. And now they don't need to hire a new person.
It's crazy. And I think that, we were talking about it before we actually started recording. We were talking about people in entry level jobs and how there's so many, what we call an entry level job that is about to be automated. And if, the less intelligence that it takes to do the job, the more basic tasks it is, the easier it is to automate.
Yeah, it's scary to understand how it's going to work. Meaning, if you can automate entry level positions or in any industry, how does someone get started
Mm-hmm.
to get the experience to become the experience is the key to be able to move their way up the ladder to whatever, like junior manager, senior manager, director, etc. How's that going to work? And I really don't. AI is one of those things that, one is, AI has been around for 50 years. What's happened is that the interface for AI has made it so easy for non-engineers to actually
Right.
implement AI that now it's just like going mainstream. So, but the problem is nobody did any planning here. What happened is the tech got built, it got released to the wild, but no one thought all this through. Because
Do they ever?
no, because tech geeks, and I say that lovingly because I am one, we just want to innovate and build crazy cool stuff. And sometimes, if you thought, first of all, you don't have enough bandwidth to think about everything like that because you're trying to just innovate and invent anyway. But yeah, I don't know, Jesse. I mean, if you have a good idea, I'd be interested in hearing it because there's going to be a gap that is, I just don't know how you get the experience to bridge that gap.
Well, and I'll tell you, I don't know that I have an idea. Um, I don't feel like you can trust, and I don't mean it in a trust or not trust way, but I don't know that you can trust academia to to replace what you get in experience when it comes to going to work, because I think it's one thing to learn about a job and it's a completely another one to actually do the job. So I don't think that you can just teach kids more and then expect that to fill in the gaps. But I also feel like some of this, and it becomes that I don't want to be that guy that's in there saying, get off my lawn. But at the same time, I feel like sometimes our innovation is actually almost it's going to end up bringing us backwards as a human species or as a huge populace on this earth because we're going to have so many mouths to feed and instead of teaching them how to fish and instead of putting a fishing pole in their hand, people are going to have to figure out how to feed these people. And to me, that's the scariest part is that you're no longer equipping people with tools and saying, go do it yourself. Like people are going to say, we'll take care of you. We're going to hand you what you need. And I feel like when we get to that point, it's going to be very difficult to put the cheese back in the can or put the genie back in the bottle, however you want to say it. But, I don't want to get there. I hope it happens after I'm gone off this planet.
In our generation, there's going to be a gap.
Yeah,
Basically, the gap's already started. There's companies that put hiring freezes on engineers. The kids are even top schools are having trouble getting jobs. You're finding even younger kids are not getting entry level jobs already because they're being automated. You're finding professional lawyers who are being replaced by AI. I mean, I
100%.
that in a law firm for a fact. There's going to be a gap, and my biggest concern is what's going to happen is that's going to be not linear but exponential in wealth distribution. So those of us who got a head start, like, and were able to save and are a little bit older, we've got that compounding interest investment type time. These kids, I say kids lovingly because they're young, they're not going to get that opportunity to do that, which fundamentally for the economy is problematic.
Oh, it's a death march. I mean, excuse me, had to cough. It's a death march. I mean, if you look at right now, as far as to your point, you've got inflation that is causing things to cost more money. You have a younger population who can't afford to buy their first house, who are struggling to pay their credit card bills and maybe pay a car payment. And so to think they're going to get ahead at any point in time, the direction we're going right now, that's not going to happen. Things are going to have to change, and they're going to have to change quickly, or you're going to have at least a lost generation, maybe more than that.
Oh, it's going to, yeah, I'll say a few things. One, I'm not sure that, so the owning the house thing is a big thing. It's one of the things that really inspired me to teach kids how to build a business because in my neighborhood, I mean, in California in general, but where we live on the coast, homes are really expensive.
Sure.
I mean, millions of dollars to get in, and millions of dollars is like $1 million, even $1 million, a lot of money to save after taxes. I mean, it's an incredible amount of money. That I think a few things are going to have to be readjusted. One, home ownership really wasn't something in America that people felt that everyone should have up until after World War II. So after World War II, we had all these veterans, and we basically had the GI Bills and all these things that allowed these people to buy homes. And that's where you got the Craftsman homes and all these homes that were built in America. And home ownership at that time became the norm. But if you look at prior to World War II, it wasn't necessarily a given or the thing, right? I'm not saying that to justify. I'm just saying there's so many. This thing is way more complex than
Right.
at first glance. But Jesse, nobody likes to listen to my history lessons in general sometimes because they don't want to hear all this, right? They're like, I want to get home, and I get it. The future, there is going to be this. So I only say that to like adjust expectations around homeownership. Having said that, I think people should be able to afford a home and an entry home. I mean, my wife and I, we bought that house for $107,000. I mean, literally the Tesla we have costs more than that,
Right.
now. So you don't have these cheaper homes. Now there's some parts in the country, a few $100,000, but a few $100,000, you still have to have money to put down, and with taxes and inflation is crazy. I talked to my friend I was riding bikes with, and he said, I went to Shake Shack the other day. And I was like, oh, he said, well, listen to this. He said, I bought the burger. It was $10. He said, I bought the fries. It was $8. Then he bought like two or three other one person, one meal was basically $32 after taxes. And it's like,
For a hamburger and fries.
what?
Yep. It's
Like,
crazy.
how does a family of four do that?
Yeah. You're seeing it in smaller markets too. You're not just seeing it in the larger California markets or in some of these major cities. It's filtering throughout all of our markets, and you're starting to see it. I mean, you're starting. I live in Jacksonville, Florida, and you see it even in this market. This market in the last 3 years, and some of it's because of COVID and driving people into this market, but you're also seeing the cost of food, the cost of electricity, the cost of everything has gone up, and it's not gone up by by single digit percents like people want to say. It's over 10%, sometimes 20+% increases on these things. And when you add all of that up and you look at that year over year and you put it on somebody who's an entry level person, as we were talking about, with somebody who makes in Jacksonville, Florida, an average salary of $40,000 to $50,000, that person can't afford to live. So you start to drive a feeling you start to drive a feeling of, why am I doing this? What is it for? Because you can't see that goal at the end of it. You can't see the gold at the end of the rainbow, if you will. So I think it's a huge topic to tackle. I think it's something I'd really enjoy speaking with you with. I feel like we have, we've gotten to touch on a few things here, and we're kind of running up on our time, but I would absolutely love to have you back on the show. If you would have interest, Brandon, you have an open door to be on Making Sense of It All anytime you like.
Well, I appreciate it. Maybe we should just make this two episodes, episode one or two volume for your listeners. But I'm really grateful. It's fun talking about this stuff, and I think you've got to talk about this stuff. People are going to have conversations at some level, because it's only through these conversations. I mean, our country was founded by federal, the federal papers that were written and
No doubt.
talked about. I mean, we're at that. We really are at that moment. And I don't even know what party I am, because I don't even understand the parties that much anymore. But I do understand that we have like $36 trillion worth of debt. When interest becomes more than you can generate and becomes a third of your GDP, you start to get into a bad place. You've got people not going back to work with empty buildings. You've got so many things here. I almost feel like we're in 2008 again, when the big short happened with the real estate market. I mean, we're in a pivotal moment, I guess is what I would say.
Well, and I think we're at a moment where you've got to, I feel like you should fix it. You can't just kick the can down the road like they
No,
did
no
in
more.
2008. Right.
No more kicking the can down the road. It has to be fixed.
100%. All right, man. I appreciate it. Before we wrap up, um, tell my audience the name of your podcast so they can go out and find it on their favorite podcast host sites.
Well, I'll just give. I have the Brandon White Show. It's a long form conversation show. I have also a show called Productivity, which is a productivity tip in less than 4 minutes an episode. So it's a quick little thing. But if you just go to my website, brandoncwhite.com, you can check out me. You get a hold of me. You can see what I'm up to. I try to keep it up to date. I write essays and things like that. I have a newsletter where I just write what I've learned in life, which is free, that you can join. So it's just brandoncwhite.com.
We'll make sure everyone has a link to that below this episode when it comes out.
Thank
Brandon, it
you.
was a pleasure. Thank you again.
Thanks a lot, Jesse.